are really hard questions, you know? And it's complicated for me too, because I was like, oh my gosh, what have I just done for 1.5 years here with you all? Coming in and saying X, Y, and Z. Okay, she was also talking about language equality, and that all languages are equal, but only somewhat. They're not totally equal. So the example she gave was, again, going back to China, and the Confucius Institute is an institute kind of like British Council, kind of like the Goethe, I am not saying that correct in German, but that Goethe Institute or whatever. And so they teach Chinese culture and they teach Chinese language, but they don't teach Cantonese, even though that is a language that originated in China. So what we're learning directly from that is that Cantonese is equal to Mandarin, but it's not as important. So I think what she was trying to say with that is, with English, we have to be very careful that we're not teaching everyone English at the expense of another, even more important language for that group of people. And an example she gave is within the European region, one of the things that she was saying is, even 100 years ago, if you were in France, you would probably speak the languages of your bordering countries, your neighbors. You will have business, you will need to be able to communicate with each other. But if you look at these statistics, so 35% of the students are now learning English, which is a huge jump. Only 14% of neighboring countries to France or Germany are learning French or German. That's a big difference. That's more than half, well, a little more than half. But what that's saying is that neighbors are no longer going to be able to communicate in a common language of the neighbor. They're going to be using English as a more dominant language. And I think the point was, there's no right and there's no wrong, but this is something to consider, because is it really what we want to do? I think the Europeans are not so excited about these statistics, so what they did is they said, we're going to have 3 languages now. So we're going to have a neighboring language, we're going to have English, and we're going to have our language. Right? So that was one of the ways, so it's English plus a local language, was one of the ways that they decided to deal with this problem. Or they are deciding. It has not been implemented yet everywhere. Okay, so we have, in this context, the purity, authenticity section, which you remember is defined by the native speaker, defined by the countries where this is important. And then we have versus cultural hybridity. So this is what English language becomes when you're actually using it and how it adapts itself to different cultures and how people of that culture begin to use language. So again, as I mentioned previously, she said that nation states sponsor what the standard language is because, well, they're the boundaries developed by national standards of native speakers. So they have something they gain from that. However, you can see starting as early as 2009, there are researchers that are arguing for a different way, where we have more of a hybrid use, which is informed by how people are actually using the language versus what the standard language is. Because I can tell you, even my friends don't use standard English all the time when they're in communication. And we have to think about, what are we actually teaching our students to do? Whoops. How are they going to be using English? Because some of the students that I've had, if they went and they talked to my friends in Atlanta, they wouldn't understand like 80% of what was said. So what really is my role? What is standard English and how should it be defined? Or should we be teaching them to use the hybrid version, or at least have elements of hybridity taught in class that would enable them to go into different cultures? The UK is like this too. Sometimes I don't even know what they're saying. And they're speaking in English. It's my native language. So what should we teach? Is basically what she's asking. Some examples of this, of how hybridity has come across, and after I go through these, I'd like maybe you to let me know if you can think of any examples as well from this culture. The first one is thank you. And this was a story that she told about, she was in two Chinese girls. They were in a store trying on clothes, and one of them tried on an outfit and it looked really good, and her friend said, "That looks nice," and she said, "Thank you." And Dr. Cranch was like, "Hold on, why would you use English to say thank you?" And it was explained to her that in Chinese, for that particular type of interaction, you don't say thank you. You can say thank you, if you're like buying something or something like that, but you don't say thank you for that interaction. And so in order to get around their social norm and the norm of the language, they use English to express something they feel should be expressed but isn't in their culture. Yeah.
Sorry. How do they feel that it should be if it's not their culture and they're not used to doing it? And what if they didn't know English, for example?
Well, I mean, English, I don't think you have to know English to be able to use words and phrases. I hear people all the time saying, like, on the phone, just like, Ukrainian, 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 okay, Ukrainian, 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 or like just basic words. You also see it on television where you'll be watching a program and, I'm not understanding anything, English, what? Where did that come from? But it doesn't necessarily mean they know it, right? But I think what you're seeing here is the movies and the impact that expression of culture has on other cultures and how it changes their own definition of culture. And you can see it. I wish I could think of an example from the States, but I know myself from living in China and living in Asia for many years, I have a very different cultural norming than a typical American. And even in the States, sometimes things that I do are not correct for the culture. So that's a great question, though, and I think that's one of the areas she's actually exploring. And that's why I wanted to share this with you, because I think these are really important questions for us to be talking about and to be asking. So this one was my favorite example that she gave. This was a road sign. So you know that when you have a road sign, this is an agreed upon language form, right? Because you don't just put, it was a government-sponsored road sign. You don't just put random road signs up with, like, language errors. I mean, maybe sometimes you do. But generally speaking, that's not done. And I believe this was in Austria. And can anyone read that? Do you know what it means?
East means east. Vienna is happy.
Exactly. Vienna is happy. And when she saw that sign, she was like, whoa, 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 why would you say Vienna is happy? Because she said, as I mentioned, she speaks German very well. And some of the signs that were translated in German in some of the tourist sections and the areas of town were very standard, very traditionally used. And then suddenly you have something like this. And she said that doesn't make any sense. So she asked her friends, and they're like, oh yeah, because it's like the American happy. It's a superficial happy. We're not really metaphysically happy that you are here. But we're like happy that you're here. So there was a different meaning behind the choice of the word, and they chose English because they wanted to project superficiality. I was like, ouch. But I thought that was really interesting. So the last one is in French, and it's too much. It just basically, again, she was like, wait a minute. My native language is French. When did you start using this? And basically, she was told, according to her story, that there's no real word for over the top, like just aggressively too much. And so they have taken the American or the English words of too much to create a new slang for over the top that they're using in French. So this is hybridity, right? When you have cultural influence in the choice of words and how it's added to your own language and your perception of English. Isn't that interesting? Can you think of any words here